Salutations from space, aloha from Earth, and welcome to the Arts of the Chart. I am Gemini Brett of More Than Astrology, Agent 1123 of the Cosmic Intelligence Agency, and I am very pleased to present today the first of what I hope to be a long string of conversations with cosmic coaches who will help steer our quadrivium quest into the sacred sciences. Today we're going to hear from Scott Onstott of Secrets in Plain Sight and Sacred Geometry Academy. Scott is a brilliant being, a gifted geometer and incredible independent researcher and teacher who has been a great guide on my own personal quest of self-initiation. But before we hear from Scott, let's take a look together at his work. This is an excerpt from Secrets in Plain Sight.
Zooming into the area in front of the Capitol building, many researchers have identified Masonic compasses built into the street plan. The compasses that run along Pennsylvania and Maryland avenues point to the White House and the Jefferson Memorial. The spread of the compasses is 1 royal mile. I might chalk this up to coincidence if it wasn't for the diagram Richard Heath has published in Sacred Number. Heath's diagram is drawn as a grid of equilateral triangles, so every edge measures 1 royal mile. The Jefferson Memorial, White House, and House of the Temple are centrally located on these nodes. The point of the pentagon facing the White House is at this node. This is simply too much coincidence to have not been the product of intentional design. I find the ancient Flower of Life diagram fits perfectly into this grid. The Flower of Life has been found all over the world. Wikipedia lists the Flower of Life in 15 countries so far. Here's the Flower of Life at the Osirion Temple in Abydos, Egypt, which is a minimum of 3,300 years old. It's a little-known fact that Leonardo da Vinci even studied the Flower of Life. This is the second depiction of a cube we've seen in DC. Metrology, the science of measurement, is one of the keys to deciphering secret architecture. Each side of the larger cube spans 2 triangles, forming an edge length equal to 2 royal miles. The polar radius of the Earth is 1728 times 2 royal miles. This equals the 3456 royal miles referenced by the Edinburgh Royal Mile. The number 1728 links DC with the mythical New Jerusalem described in the Bible. And the city lieth 4 square, and the length is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. The dimensions of New Jerusalem describe a cube whose volume is 1728 billion furlongs. Did you ever wonder why the US and Israel have such a strong bond? DC is the New Jerusalem.
So Secrets in Plain Sight, everyone, by Scott Onstott, which you can see on YouTube. It's an amazing adventure. It is not short. Bring your notebook and pen with you. You'll be taking a lot of notes, and there's an entire second version that you can purchase on Scott's website, which is secretsinplainsight.com, and it's my great honor to have Scott Onstott here today to share a little bit with you as an amazing geometer and independent researcher into the great mysteries. Scott, how in the heavens are you?
I'm doing fine, and thanks for having me, Brett.
That's my treat. You've been a great inspiration for me. I could even say a hero, and really have kind of helped me, you, and many other teachers that I've found just remotely release myself from some of the cloud of conspiracy theory, I think, and open into some of these occulted mysteries in such a way that don't have to be dark, but have allowed them to just be more interesting and magical and fascinating.
I think that a lot of people have to go through this kind of almost like a dark night of the soul, where you delve into the conspiracies and realize that there's a lot of things going on under the surface that aren't publicized. But for me, my experience was coming out through the other side of that dark night, was realizing that these patterns, these conspiracies, actually go beyond our human scope, and they are encoded in the structure of the Earth itself, and encoded in the relationships between the planets. So for me, that was quite illuminating, that these patterns are throughout the universe, and perhaps because of that, we shouldn't be surprised if they show up in our human monuments, the things that we make. Sometimes we make them kind of unwittingly, that we're part of a grander pattern. And that's one of the messages of my film Secrets in Plain Sight, is kind of trying to get you beyond the conspiracy to look at the larger picture.
You mentioned in Secrets that you kind of got propelled into this path of self-initiation. Could you share a bit of how that happened for you in your life?
Yeah, I think it happens to a lot of people, where you are on a search for meaning, and you become a seeker. You start looking into all kinds of things. And I noticed that some people just aren't on that path yet, and that's totally fine. But at some point, you might go through this kind of quest for knowledge, where you're kind of insatiable in learning all this stuff. That is kind of what I went through. And in the midst of that process, I had an intuitive reading, and the person told me I needed to make a film, and they didn't say what it was going to be about. I needed to figure that out for myself. And so I took on that challenge and created Secrets in Plain Sight, and sort of a download of all of the things I had been studying. And I'm really pleased that something like 9 million views have been made on volume 1 so far at this point. So that's a lot of people that I've reached with my little movie.
Yeah, well, big movie at that. Yeah, the subject matter is so expansive, and it certainly reached me, and so many of my friends who have watched it, we'll have kind of movie parties and check out Secrets in Plain Sight and reflect and speak about that. I really hope people watching this who haven't seen it yet will add yourselves to the list. So the quadrivium, we know, is number and geometry, astronomy, musical harmony, right? So number itself, geometry being number in space, musical harmony being number in time, and astronomy being number in space and time. But there's this term that we use these days, which is sacred geometry. And I wonder, as I draw, it's amazing. Like, I'll sit down to draw the flower of life, 51 circles, but I'll get to one circle, and suddenly I go into some trance, and I come out like an hour later and there's drool on the paper, and I've just circled for the first time in my life, and just really seen the mysteries of that amazing shape, which is so mysterious. I mean, we can't even really measure the circumference of a circle, right? Because pi is supposedly irrational, though I prefer this term mysterious. But I guess my question here is why is geometry sacred? How does just bringing the compass and the rule to a pad of paper initiate us some way into something greater?
Well, I think that that the universe is made of it is geometry. Everything is fundamentally geometry, and you have ancient mystics who say this, and you have modern physicists who agree on this, that everything ultimately is geometry. And so when you look at geometry in itself, and you just draw a circle, and you kind of go into it, you're actually dealing with the blueprints of the universe here. You're dealing with some heavy duty stuff. It takes you right to a very deep level. And sacred geometry is different than mundane or practical geometry that you might use to draw a floor plan of a house, or if you're just using that as a tool, because sacred geometry is actually something where you're looking at the geometry in and of itself, just for the sake of the geometry. You're not trying to build something using lines and circles and stuff. You are just letting the geometry speak to you, letting it affect you. And so this is a very different practice than, drafting floor plans. It's totally different. And that was part of my inspiration for creating the software Q that we can talk about maybe a little later. But it's about trying to strip away all of the things that kind of are distracting from the program, and just getting down to the fundamentals of the tools that you need to draw, and allowing you to just to focus your attention on the geometry itself, rather than what you're trying to make as this little scale model of something in the real world.
A couple of days ago, I was on YouTube. I had this question of, when did I first hear about Scott Onstott? How did that happen? And I searched your name on YouTube, and a bunch of interviews came up. Interview with Randall Carlson, who's been also an amazing kind of remote teacher for me. And I saw an interview you did a while ago with Henrik on Red Ice Radio, when Red Ice had a pretty different feel back then. And that was probably...
It really has changed, by the way. It's funny.
It has changed very much, but back then it was just really exploring these mysteries, the conspiracies, but more with this question mark than the exclamation point, I like to say. And I'm pretty sure that's probably when I first heard your name and heard about Secrets in Plain Sight. And that led me to The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, the great book by Oveson. And, I think you and I both were opened a little bit by Dan Brown's work, and then looking back to probably Holy Blood and Holy Grail and some of the resources that he was pulling from to bring out the Da Vinci Code and whatnot. But it was fun to see your name in YouTube and a bunch of different interviews. I got to hear some new ones, actually. But I also saw Scott Onstott in AutoCAD, right? It's a wholly different world. So I thought I should ask you also about that, Scott Onstott.
Well, that professional Scott Onstott has been making his living now for 15 years, writing books on AutoCAD and recording instructional videos on AutoCAD, SketchUp, 3ds Max, and Photoshop. So that's kind of how I pay my bills, is teaching people how to use these tools. And those skills have really been helpful personally, so that I could create Secrets in Plain Sight by myself, having all the digital skills necessary to pull that together. It also shows that I have a lot of experience with CAD, and that was, for a long time I've wanted to teach people sacred geometry using CAD, but the problem is that AutoCAD is very expensive. And so the only way that you can really use it is if you're using it professionally as an architect or engineer or designer. And that really limits the audience down to those folks. And so I was really excited to create this Q software, because it can come in at a very, very low price point compared to AutoCAD. Just $33 instead of $220 a year or something.
And then AutoCAD's not necessarily built to do what we want to do in sacred geometry specifically.
Right. It's just loaded with features, so it's bewildering. It's one of the harder programs to learn because of its complexity. And in sacred geometry, you don't only need 10% of that. So
right, give me a compass and a ruler. So I saw that Q was coming out. It's like, wow, the guy. Like literally, if someone was going to build a sacred geometry program that I want to use, that I know is going to have the tools that I need, it's you. And then saw also in the Kickstarter campaign that there's these different levels. And at one point, you also get to receive different challenges and teachings and that kind of thing. And I just got so excited. And of course, I signed up right away and started spreading the word. And, I hope this interview will help do that, because I think there's 10 days left on the Kickstarter. But I was wondering, Scott, if maybe you could share your screen and take us through Q a little bit and show us what it does.
Right. So it's really a very simple interface, as you see here. There's some tools over here, and I can open up the layer list on the right. And I'm also going to open up the library browser for a moment here and go into my layers folder and bring in some of my layers That just saves a little time. And then I'll just delete that block. So over here I have a bunch of layers now that I can choose from. So I'm just going to draw a circle from the center out to the radius. And notice I'm not caring about where the circle is or how big the circle is. In sacred geometry, we tend not to measure things. We just let the geometry kind of do the work. And what I want to do is choose a point on the edge of the circle here and draw another circle that goes to the center of the original circle. So now we have a vesica piscis shape. And then I'm going to change layers and draw another circle here. And then another one. And we have kind of like another kind of vesica piscis that's slightly different. The centers of these orange circles are on the 2 points here and here. And I'm just going to keep going. I have kind of a goal in mind, so just bear with me. I'm going to draw a couple more circles. And then I'll switch to the green layer. I'll go over here and go up to the top level, go into the line tool, draw a line. I'm going to draw that line right from this point. And I want to lock that line in so that it's horizontal. So I'll just click this button, draw that line in, draw another one, and then I'll draw this triangle in. And just to clean things up, I'm going to trim these two segments away. So now I have a triangle, and this actually represents the elevation of the Great Pyramid. And I can go ahead and put in a dimension, and we can actually measure the slope of that angle. And it turns out it's 51 degrees, 37 minutes. So it's not perfect like it would be 51 degrees, 51 minutes if it was exactly the slope of the Great Pyramid. But this is very close. It's amazingly close. And it comes right out of, 6 circles. And I just kind of find that amazing. So I wanted to share that with you. This is just kind of a feel for how you can draw things in Q. There wasn't a lot of measurement going on. It's mostly letting the geometry speak for itself, and then you just draw things between intersecting points and so on. I can show you a few more things if you like.
Well, let me just reflect on that, because that was amazing and so smooth. And I love that you're able to select different colors like that, because when we draw on the pad, when I'm just drawing with the lead and all these intersections and lines come in, it can get pretty confusing as to what I was, where I am in the construction.
The layers, the colors that I've used, they allow me to toggle off the layers if I want to, you see? So it allows you to stay organized. As your drawing becomes more and more complicated, you can hide things, and you can use the properties window to change the layer of objects. So for example, over here I can select these 2 red circles, and then I can change their layer to a different color if I wish. It's very simple. So what I wanted to do is kind of clean it up and make it as streamlined as possible here. Let me show you another interesting property of this diagram, and I'll show you that by going into the library browser and grabbing something I've already drawn, which is a golden rectangle. Here's a golden rectangle right here. So I'm going to insert that into this drawing. So here I have the golden rectangle, and I'm going to just make that a block by clicking this button. And I'll give it a name. I'll call it golden rectangle. And making it a block is just a way to treat it as a single object instead of a collection of lines and arcs. So now if I click on it, the whole thing selects. And now I'm going to move that over here to this intersection point. And then I'll rotate it negative 90 degrees, and then scale it up from this point. I'm going to do that dynamically, so I'm going to scale it from the end here and just have it go all the way down to here. And now we can see that the this point, the top of the pyramid, and this point here are in a golden ratio. So I just find that pretty amazing that, again, out of these few circles, we have the golden ratio emerges, and so does the slope of the Great Pyramid.
It's absolutely amazing. And it just excites me even more for my copy of Q to show up in the electronic mail, because it's just going to speed up my own investigations in sacred geometry. I mean, I know that I'll also always draw on the launch pad, as I like to call it, with the compass and the rule, because there's something in that practice. But, you know, see, for me, this is this marriage of the organic and the, I don't want to call it artificial at all, but the technological, in such a way that's responsible, right? Like, this is a real creation. We're actual stewards of the computer at this point, and in a relationship with it, and using this great gift of software that allows us to expand our quest into these sacred studies just exponentially, yeah, and very rapidly. So I'm so excited to see this tool. So that library that you're showing, Scott, will that show up when I receive my copy as well, or I have to create that also on my own?
My plan is to include a number of my favorite sacred geometry drawings in the library, so that just you open it up and they're there. Then you can explore those drawings. You can insert them into new drawings that you make. You can be inspired by them and go on new directions, perhaps, with the geometry that you see. So that's really an important part of Q, is having that library. And then over time, as you work, you can add your own drawings to the library. So you can visually see, with these little thumbnail images at least, your drawings that you've made, and then you can just open them directly. That way you don't have to spend a lot of time hunting for names in a list of names. I'm more of a visual person, so I like to, just say, oh yeah, I remember that one there. Oh yeah. I don't have to remember the name necessarily.
And there's going to be a teaching portion of this in Q, right? And how will that look? Is there anything loaded up that you have right now that you could show us, or do you want to just?
No, I haven't created the tutorial videos yet, and there'll be two types. There'll be reference videos, which would the idea here would be that you'd see this toolbar, and then if you click on one of the tools, it would do the same thing that you see in Q. It would go down to a deeper level, and when you click on an actual tool, it would then open a video that would explain how to use the features of that tool. So the reference videos are kind of like a dictionary, where you just want to look up how do I use this tool, and you just watch the video on it, and then you know. And then there'd be a separate kind of set of videos that would be projects. So for example, if we want to draw this drawing, it would be a screen captured video of me explaining how, going step by step through the whole process of drawing this drawing. So you can follow along and do that too. And there'd be a bunch of different projects that we would go through. And that would, just by watching me solve kind of geometric challenges, in different ways, and using the tools together, is then how you really get the most out of Q. Is you go, oh, now I see how to use these tools together. I get it. And that's something that comes together for you when you watch the project videos.
So let's talk a little bit about the Great Pyramid.
Sure.
And I don't know if you want to leave Q open, or you could stop screen share. Maybe you want to show us some things in there.
Well, I can show you some maybe some artwork I have.
Awesome.
I have a lot of artwork on that involves the Great Pyramid.
And this is clearly at secretsinplainsight.com, your website.
That's right. Just secretsinplainsight.com/art. You can just click on this button up here to get there as well. And then there's a whole gallery of my art in here. So, you know, on this page, I see there's one image here that has the Great Pyramid in it. And this diagram came about by, first of all, drawing this shape here where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-sided figure, okay? And then out of that, by kind of extending each side out to meet a square, we end up creating these Great Pyramid slope angles. These 4 of them are around the perimeter of the square. And then if you draw a circle from the center to the apex of these Great Pyramids, you have another circle that just happens to be the exact proportion of the moon to the earth. So this is, you know, well known that the Great Pyramids form encodes the proportion of the moon to the earth. And this is just one of many diagrams that I've made that shows this relationship. This is just my latest one. So this diagram encodes the proportions of moon and earth, but it does it in a different way. And it starts with a square, and then it has this these 2 orange lines that go up. And you know what I've actually done here is on my website, sacredgeometry.academy here, I have a projects page that goes into this. I'll just go there now. I'll just click on this project. And this actually takes you step by step through how to create this particular drawing. As you see here, it's adding each piece of geometry step by step. And it kind of gives you a sequencing. I've just recently discovered how to do this technically using SVG graphics. So I'm actually really happy with how this came out, because this works on you know, any web browser. And then you can use the arrow keys to step through each step and see how it works. But just doing this simple diagram encodes the size of the moon and the earth to 99.97% accuracy. I think that's pretty amazing.
I think that's absolutely amazing. And the moon-earth ratio itself is one of the great courses for us to achieve the sacred geometry challenge of squaring the circle, yeah?
That's right, yeah. Another way of getting that proportion is by the act of squaring the circle. It's really just totally mind-blowing that the earth and the moon are in this perfect geometric relationship. It just tells us about the perfection of creation. You know, it's so far from being random. I mean, what are the chances that these 2 objects would, you know, be just the right proportion to encode all of this beautiful sacred geometry? It just blows my mind.
It almost feels like there's some kind of divine plan going down, but it's not 100% accurate, Scott, so it can't be real.
Right. Well, I think it's actually good that it's not 100%, because if it was, it would be I would kind of feel like a tyranny, like in a way that there's no escape from interpreting reality in this way. This is just one of many interpretations. But I think the correlation is so very high here, and the amount that it's off is so very minuscule that I think it's really worth perceiving, you know?
Yeah, I find when I draw with compass and rule that one of the great teachings that I didn't set out to learn was that the imperfections themselves are part of perfection, because it's almost impossible to draw perfectly with the compass and rule, right? That's why the computer and this program Q is going to be such a great help for when we design these very complex patterns, we can do that perfectly, right? We can get that perfect form of that shape. And, you know, in sacred geometry, we look at drawings like this, there's just something opens up. It just feels right. Yeah. But doing it on the pad, it's, you know, you get further and further, and it's like, well, I just missed with that little point, and then it every exponentially gets further off as we flower out or whatever. But that teaching that the imperfection is part of their perfection has been one of the most important lessons I think I've learned on the launch pad, as I like to call it.
I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, I think it's a wonderful way to explore sacred geometry is using the traditional instruments, the compass and the straight edge. And I don't think anybody should miss that. I think it's really the most transformative way to get into sacred geometry. But unfortunately, those tools are very limited in how accurate they are, because, you know, your pencil has a certain width, and, you know, the angle that you're holding your pencil against the ruler and the shakiness of your hand and the quality of the paper all affect how accurately you can draw. And then little errors kind of get compounded. You know, like if you're trying to draw a flower of life, you have to draw a lot of circles, and it's really hard to keep it on track. As you kind of go out and create more and more circles, you'll find that the error gets bigger and bigger, and you're like, oh, well, it's not really that accurate at the end. And that was kind of one of my impetuses for working with Q, is because Q is so accurate. It's actually 1,000,000 times more accurate than you can be with the traditional instruments. And so it really has a place. But that being said, there's something lost of doing it in the computer, because it's very mental then when you're in the computer. It's not as physical. And there's something beautiful about using your hands on the paper, because it involves more of your whole body. It's more of a body and mind together kind of experience. And that's why I prefer that as a means of personal transformation, of using the compass and the straight edge. But it can only take you so far with the accuracy. And so that's why I think Q is a perfect complement to using the traditional tools.
That's part of my intention with this quadrivium approach to astrology, which in modern times is typically taught through definitions, rules, language, in a sense, equations. And, you know, in mathematics, which is one of my great loves, there's something about learning the proof of the equation. When you really get into it, you can almost get to that proof before the teacher shows it to you. And then that equation in a way becomes yours. You're not utilizing only something that was given to you. It's like blossoming from inside of you. So this quadrivium quest, like really starting with the compass and the rule to explore the symbolism of the geometry. And then I'm going to look at some of the aspects musically, because we can map the 12 signs of the zodiac to the 12 half steps of an octave. And then we can actually hear the square, which is the minor third, or the trine, which is the major third, and experience, you know, with our body, with our senses, sentiently, this great sacred science of astrology. And I feel like, in a way, it's the more yin or feminine approach. So there's something about getting to these sites. So there's a synchronicity for me after maybe a year after I was turned on to Secrets in Plain Sight and really got into the DC research. My sister moved there. And so I was getting to visit a lot and to really spend some time there and to check out some of the stuff that Ovitson wrote in his book. And I found a lot of it to be totally true. And some of it actually doesn't really work. But I was there in DC, which is this amazing temple. And it became one of my greatest astrology teachers and astronomy teachers. I learned this thing about the co-rising of stars. So I wanted to share a little bit about that. Aldebaran rising right now as you and I are speaking. And what DC taught me is that Aldebaran and Sirius are kind of these paired stars. So as you show in Secrets in Plain Sight, if you're looking from the White House, Sirius rises over the Capitol building. And so we can say that's on the heliacal rise date of Sirius, when the dog days are over and Sirius shows itself again just in dawn right before the sunrise when you first see its light. But the truth is, the Sirius is going to rise on that angle every day. You're just going to see it at a different time, right? But the partner star is Aldebaran. Near the 39th parallel where DC is located, Sirius rises 20 degrees south of due east, the azimuth of Pennsylvania Avenue, and Aldebaran sets 20 degrees north of due west, the opposite azimuth. So the White House sees Sirius rise over the Capitol building, and the Capitol sees Aldebaran set over the White House. Now, the partner temple to the White House on the DC compass that you show in Secrets in Plain Sight is the Jefferson Memorial, placed on the Maryland Avenue azimuth, which is aligned 20 degrees north of due east, and therefore 20 degrees south of due west. So from the Jefferson Memorial, Aldebaran rises over the Capitol building, and from the Capitol, Sirius sets over the Jefferson Memorial. And so there are kind of these partner stars. In fact, I just looked before we started where you live currently in Victoria, in BC, in Canada. Aldebaran rises about 27 degrees north of due east, and Sirius rises 27 degrees south of due east. And that made me smile because 27 is this very key number in your work and that you've brought forth. And I thought that would be a fun thing maybe for you to tell us about a little bit, 27, 54, et cetera.
Yeah, 27 is the first term in what I have called the cosmic sequence, and the sequence proceeds by doubling. So 27, 54, 108, 216, 432, 864, 17, 28, 3, 4, 5, 6. And each one of these terms is really, encodes a lot of stuff. The best place I would just look up my blog post on the cosmic sequence for a lot of information about that on secretsinplainsight.com. It's also in my anthology, which is like rolled together my blog for many years and put it in one book. But, just Google 108 and you'll find tons of stuff, for example. It's the number of double stitches on a baseball. It's the molecular weight of silver. It's the radius of the moon, 1,080 miles. It's many things, but they're just amazing correlations with these particular numbers. So 27 is kind of a code that connects us with this whole trip about the cosmic sequence. And that's amazing that to me, the visual image of the compass, equally on either side, pointing to Sirius and Aldebaran is really interesting, because that's really memorable how you can think of that,
Yeah, they did amazing star alignments like this. For example, you show where the Pentagon is on, the cube and the flower of life and these kinds of things. And the story is that FDR had it moved like in the last weeks to that very specific place. But from the Capitol building, which is kind of like the observatory for the whole setup, Scorpius and Acrub, a claw of the scorpion, sets over the Pentagon. And from the Pentagon, the ram rises behind the Capitol building. So these two constellations, Scorpius and Aries, traditionally associated with those astrological signs, Scorpio and Aries are the two signs that were traditionally ruled by the planet Mars, god of war, right? So we get this Capitol Pentagon alignment tuned to war. And the things that were happening, like when the cornerstone was laid, right? Obviously, very intentional timing for the cornerstone layings and those Masonic ceremonies. Actually, when the bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, very sadly, the planetary alignments on that specific azimuth, or that line, that angle between Pentagon and the Capitol building are just amazing. I put up a video on YouTube some time ago. It's 3 hours and 33 minutes and 33 seconds long. But it's tuning into a lot of those star alignments of Washington, D.C. In fact, that's what it's called, the star alignments of D.C. And I showed in that how Orion is mapped into DC, something I hadn't seen before. For example, the belt of Orion rises due east and vertically. So if you're looking from the Lincoln Memorial at the Capitol building, and you've got the Washington Monument just in between, the belt stars of Orion rise like that. And they actually map to that geometry. We know it's not a perfect line from White House, Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, and Ovidson has his reason for that. There's very potential reasons just for the solidity of the land, that the monument couldn't be placed on the perfect triangle.
Like they wanted to put it there, but they couldn't because it was swampy, right?
Right, yeah, that's the story, but it also maps perfectly to the geometry of Orion's belt.
It's sort of like the 99.97% kind of thing, where you think, oh, it's off, but actually it's not off.
Mm-hmm.
It's just right.
Yeah, and so there's this question of, and in that case, we know the three pyramids on the Giza Plateau map Orion's belt too, and that was done all over the globe. But some of this is very clearly intentional. And Secrets in Plain Sight, you take us all over the world and show how DC through Central Park goes to Stonehenge and then Paris and London. I mean, it's such an amazing quest. And you get to a point here where it's like, okay, this is beyond human intention or ability, right? So I think this is a wonderful question of how in the heavens is this thing happening? How much of it is intentional, or where is it coming from?
Well, I think all of these things that we're talking about point to consciousness. They're not random. They're very specific. Like the Champs-Elysees in Paris is aligned to the heliacal rising of Sirius also, just like Pennsylvania Avenue is. What are the chances? It seems pretty remote, but they are. These are two of the most important streets in the Western world. And yet they are encoded that way. So is it just a human conspiracy of Masons? Maybe. But when you see so many of these things, you start to wonder about who is the consciousness behind all of this, My first thought was that it's got to be people, architects working together in secret. But then it kind of seems preposterous when you see these patterns occur over millennia, that there'd be some kind of conspiracy that would last that long. It seems more likely that there's something written into the structure of reality that's very geometric, and that the sort of grand architect of the universe, if you will, is patterning everything according to this geometric blueprint. And I kind of groove with that theory a little more than the evil people making a conspiracy, because what would be the point of that anyway?
It's not just aliens either, huh?
No, aliens doesn't seem like a very satisfying explanation to me. Just like people who aren't born around here did it. Well, we don't know anything about them, so I guess we can say that, but it doesn't really advance the argument much, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at like Secrets in Plain Sight does, or the work of Randall Carlson or Graham Hancock, or so many of these wonderful researchers of modern day, we find our way exploring these ancient sites, and there's enough of them left. I mean, like the Great Pyramid, like Avebury or Stonehenge or Callanish or whatever it may be, all around the world. And we find these amazing astronomical alignments, these amazing geometrical similarities, synchronicities. I mean, you've shown again and again and again that this site is 3,333.33 kilometers from this site, and this one's 333 miles from this site. And these seemingly arbitrary units of measure become not at all arbitrary. And these distances also not at all arbitrary, but is there something higher that's part of the plan, right? And so we see in so many ways that the artist, who's just, maybe we could say, channeling or allowing creation to create through them, is symbolizing this amazing code or this amazing geometrical significance into their works, sometimes not intentionally or knowingly so, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I think when you let inspiration flow through you, it oftentimes will express itself in these geometric ways, perhaps without you being aware of it consciously. And I think I've tried to show how that happens in a lot of fine art through the work of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, a lot of painters. They encode the golden ratio. In fact, they structured their canvas according to the golden ratio. And it's perhaps they were just doing that, but they never told anyone. But so many of them did that I start to wonder if it isn't tied in with our aesthetic sense. When you become a good artist, you're very attuned with your aesthetic sense, and you know it just looks right in that place, and maybe you don't know why, but maybe there's a subsystem in your brain that's actually calculating all of that geometrically, and it's like you're developing your aesthetic sense is kind of tuning in with your inner math, and you get a hit when the math is right. You just go, yeah, that's right. That looks good. You know, and you might not be conscious of that, but what you're doing is kind of tying into the patterns of the macrocosm. You're tying in your personal microcosm. You're tying into the way that the universe is built, and it just feels right. There's just something unmistakable about it. It just is the right way to go. And I think that's how these things come about. It's more than like a conscious, intelligent plan that's been secret and only the elite know about it. I just think that's a little far-fetched.
Right, because we can all know about it, and the secrets are in plain sight. Like,
yeah,
literally,
they're right there in front of you. And so why would these elite go to such trouble to do something ultimately that's right in the public domain?
Yeah, and the conspiracy theory rap is that there's this rule of dark magic that if you're going to manipulate the world, you have to show them that you're doing it, which is a fantastic and fun point of view. But there's also this invitation extended, right? So like William Henry, for example, kind of introduced this idea to me that the Capitol building itself is this temple for our ascension. And William Henry is such an amazing researcher, and he's pretty far out there, right? But when I went into that Capitol dome with that idea in my heart, well, then looking up, and later that night in a dream, I saw that apotheosis of George Washington actually also aligns not only to the hexagon, the perfect hexagon, right, and the flower of life and these great constructions, but also to the winter hexagon, as it's called, in the sky. This great circle of stars that the Lakota called the sacred hoop, or some of the Egyptian mystery schools called the sacred, or the silver gate, and say it's where the souls come from, and that's a wrap for another time. But there's something about the invitation of these constructions, regardless of the intention behind them. I mean, even if they were, and I'm not saying they were at all, but even if they were built for some dark purpose, there's a force behind that, right? That's creating beauty and love and this invitation into the mysteries and the path of self-initiation that you and I have found ourselves on. And again, I have great gratitude for you, because Secrets in Plain Sight has been one of the great parts of my path. It almost kind of the opening portal to that path for me as far as the geometry is concerned.
Well, I'm really glad to have been helpful in your own personal path. That was kind of why I put it out there, is hoping that others would would resonate with my personal journey. And I'm glad that it's kind of opened doors for you initially. So I feel like mission accomplished, you know?
Totally. And for millions of people, as you know. And then Q, for me, I know, and so for so many people, is going to be another, right, not veering off the path, but taking me more directly straight onto it. I'm so excited for that software. I'm just like amazingly grateful that it happened. I feel like I pushed the right button somehow in my own universe. So back to the numbers, I shared in one of the chapters of the Arts of the Chart about that great number 108, that the beads and the mala, shows up in so many ways, but how the moon is 108 moon diameters from the earth, and the sun is 108 sun diameters from the earth, and the sun is 108 earth diameters in diameter. And I spoke about the amazing synchronicities of eclipse magic with the number 400 as well, that I actually learned from you. But this 108 number, and being 4 times 27, and being in the sequence that you have, right? Well, 27, we find again the synchronicity of that's the azimuth of Aldebaran's rising in Victoria when we started this interview. And 27 nakshatras or lunar mansions in the astrological tradition. And the moon's sidereal cycle, or its path around the earth, takes 27 days, but it's actually 27 and a third days.
27.3. Yeah.
Right. And
yeah, that's a really important key number there too. Yeah.
That's where I wanted to go with you. What is this 0.3 or this 0.3333333, this 1/3 thing, and how has 33 shown up in your own research?
Well, I think there are two different things here. There's the 27.3, which is the, lunar cycle, and I can go on a whole trip about that. But then the repetitive threes, and actually more abstractly, the repetitive digits in general could be 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, all the way up. That's another key. So what should I address first? The 27.3 or the rep digits?
Well, I think the rep digits, because I think a lot of people watching this have had that experience where they start seeing 11:11 on the clock or 4:44. A lot of people come over here to receive their first astrology reading for that reason. And I think it was actually the number synchronicities that first started opening up for me. Why do I keep seeing the same number on the clock every day? Is it just my subconscious alarm clock telling me to look at that time, or is there something else? And when I began to follow my thoughts or my feelings in those moments, right, I feel like going to the coffee shop. No, I have work to do. Well, no, I'm going to go to the coffee shop because I felt like that. And I saw the number, I'm going. And then I meet the person who teaches me about the thing, and it goes on and on and on, right? So a lot of people are having this this number synchronicity experience. And so what is that, and what are the rep digits?
Well, I think the rep digits are I like to kind of characterize it as a cosmic messaging service. So when you see these rep digits, it could be in any place, right? On the clock, on your odometer, on a sign, in any way that it manifests itself to you, it's kind of a message, just a clue, like, okay, pay attention to this. And if you start to see a preponderance of these things happening in a short period of time, I think what it's an indication of is you're where you are supposed to be right now. It's like there's massive coordination going on in your life behind the scenes. And when you start to see these repetitive digits, it means that you're on the right track. You're going to be getting more interesting interactions with people and with the world when you start to see these interactions. And so it's a very subtle clue that is easy to overlook. Oh yeah, you can just say there's nothing to that. But I think the more you kind of tune into that, the more interesting things will happen in your life. You'll have chance encounters with people, interesting conversations. You'll have just amazing things will start to happen, because it's almost like you are responding to the nature of reality here. You're getting in tune with it, and you're opening yourself up to whatever may come by just by focusing on the rep digits. I don't know. Does that sound a little too woo-woo to you?
Well, not to me, not at all. And most likely not to the folks who are watching this video, because we're on this quest, and these interesting conversations that open up, it's like, what's behind this thing? We start asking the questions that really can't be answered by anything but a greater question. And that path is this way into the self-initiations of the mysteries. I mean, the quadrivium itself is so interesting. There's not really a book, right? I mean, there's many ancient texts that we can find our way to. There is a book called the Quadrivium, which is a compilation of wooden books, which is wonderful. But
it's actually, the quadrivium is like the gateway into the mysteries, It's like, that's how you can explore the whole universe, is through this lens of the quadrivium. It's one of the ways to do it.
Right, and the textbook is doing it, right? The textbook of geometry is drawing geometry. And so, for example, in Q, when you have projects and teachings of, this is how you can create the golden spiral, for example, well, something's going to come in for me of, oh my gosh, then I could do this, right? And then the subject itself becomes the teacher.
Well, and it's almost like when you draw a golden rectangle and draw the spiral, you're interacting with these like the bedrock of reality in such a way that it's like dealing directly with archetypes, and people they'll break down crying, or they'll just feel elated, or a lot of different reactions will happen where it's like an invitation to do inner work when you draw these things. It's just incredible what happens to people when they delve into geometry. And for everyone, it's kind of different what happens, but it's kind of like saying, yeah, I'm ready. I want to open myself up and see what happens. So I'm going to square the circle, and let's be open to what comes from that, you know?
Yeah. So the question about 3-3, actually, I'll just encourage people to check out the Secrets in Plain Sight on YouTube. Scott does a really great unfolding of many of the ways that 33 shows up in nature. But in your sequence, right, we get to 3, 4, 5, 6. And today is March 4th, so we have the 5 and the 6 remaining. And that's something that I'm so interested in your work, something that I hadn't seen before, of this way that the 5 and the 6 marry kind of mystically. Is there something you could share with us about that?
Yeah, the 6 and the 5 forming a ratio, like 6/5, is really another amazing resonance. And I find that the cubit is a great way to look at that. So the cubit, if each side has a length of a cube, if each side of a cube has a length of 6/5 feet, that's 1.2 feet. It ends up creating this whole trip. You know, I have graphics on it. I've written chapters on it, and there's really not enough time for me to delve into that. But it's a key to metrology, to measuring, and it's where we get the term cubit. I think ultimately is coming from this cube that is measured with this 6 and 5 relationship. And the ancient city of Jerusalem was based on this cubit. And this comes from the work of Robin Heath and his brother Richard Heath, where they decoded that sacred geometry of Jerusalem. And I went into that, I think, in my volume 1 film. And that touches on where the ancient Egyptians even encoded the 6 and the 5 in the form of the bent pyramid, because of the way that the slope angles are. It encodes this hexagon and the pentagon. And so, like Albrecht Dürer brought these things together in his course on sacred geometry. And I think it was Eliphas Levi who said he who brings the pentagon and the hexagon together has solved half of the sacred secret, And so there's different geometers who have recognized this in the past, that this is really a key to a whole set of really interesting information that is unlocked just by bringing these two shapes together. And in a way, in my mind, I think the pentagon is like a symbol of life. It's like vitality. Living organisms oftentimes are based on the golden ratio, which is encoded in the pentagon. And then the hexagon is more about structure. It's about triangulation. It's about the vacuum structure, like Nassim Haramein talks about. And so bringing these two together, bringing the vital life quality together with the structure of space together, is like it's like creating a universe or something. It's bringing life into the matrix.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll add this from some of the mystery traditions. It suggested that 5 is the number of the human, our 5 appendages and 5 digits and these kinds of things. The Vitruvian man was a representation of that. And that 6 was the number of the heavens. But in so many traditions, the sphere itself, the perfect form, was the heavenly form. And so one thing is when we bring the hexagon, right, it's the closest that the line can get to the sphere, right, or the circle, because the radius of a circle maps out at the side length of a perfect hexagon, right? So this is like, in a sense, the line and the circle marrying together. I love that you mentioned Robin Heath a couple of times. I'm reading his book, The Lost Science of Measuring the Earth, right now.
That's a great one, yeah.
Yeah, and And you have many books as well, Scott. So, this is probably a good place for us to wrap up a little bit. I really, really encourage people to check out Q. Please support it on Kickstarter. If it doesn't come out, I'm going to cry for weeks. And while that would be a good way for me to move some of this energy, I'd rather be drawing in this great software. There's another Kickstarter campaign you had that produced the golden ratio calipers, right?
Right. It's called the Proportioner. And that was a very successful campaign, over 2,000% funded.
Wow.
And Q, unfortunately, is kind of lagging behind on the campaign. I'm not sure it's going to happen in this particular campaign. If it doesn't, I will still plan to go ahead with it. It'll take me longer because I won't be funded. So it'll just have to be a hobby that I work on, in my spare time. But eventually it will come out, and people will be able to get their hands on it. So I'm also working on kind of creating a new Proportioner. Proportioner 2.0 is going to be coming out in a little while. So that's something I'm looking forward to as well. And I'll be doing another Kickstarter for that project.
Amazing. Well, as it is in Kickstarter, sometimes it's that last week where it really gets the push, and may it be so in this case. So folks, get involved. I mean, this is an amazing opportunity to connect to the ability to draw a perfect form and to receive teachings and guidance of self-initiation on this path, whether it's stated directly as that way or not. And so there's many books as well. You can find these at secretinplainsight.com. Scott, I mean, I really encourage people, many of them out here will have already seen Secrets in Plain Sight. And these many books that you've brought forth, is there one in particular that you feel would be the good first book for people to read of your works?
Well, I guess it depends on the angle that you're coming from. If you're just interested in my works in general, I recommend my anthology, which has just a lot of information, delves into a lot of different mysteries. If you're just curious about geometry and sacred geometry, and you want to know more about that, I would recommend The Divine Proportion that I've written. It's a much smaller book. It's all in color. So you can learn by looking at the pictures, reading some of the accompanying text to go into that. If you're more of an art fan, you might want to look at my Secrets in Plain Sight Leonardo da Vinci book, which shows how he used the golden ratio to structure his canvases. So that's an interesting take on the art world.
Awesome. And so you can find those and many amazing, mysterious introductions to the sacred sciences at secretsinplainsight.com and sacredgeometryacademy.com. Is that the right URL?
That's right. It's my new website, sacredgeometry.academy. When I found that there was such a thing as a domain suffix called academy, I just had to have Sacred Geometry Academy, because it's kind of, it's all about what I want to do, is teach people more about sacred geometry. So,
well, it's new to me. I mean, when you shared that earlier, I was like, how do I not know about this yet? And I know what I'm doing today. So.
Check it out. Yeah, there's a lot of good information there. I'm going to be hosting events, which is something I want to just finish
Please
with.
do.
So I'm going to be doing these events, where we get maybe 30, 40 people together for the weekend, and we delve into the mysteries of sacred geometry using the traditional instruments, compass, straight edge, pencil, paper. We'll be decorating a large-scale mandala using the Tibetan techniques, using sand and rocks and shells and natural materials. And I co-hosted a workshop in Ireland last fall with my friend Jeff Fitzpatrick, and he's had about 10 years experience doing these group mandalas. So it was just wonderful to bring in my, instruction on how to draw it on paper with his experience with bringing the whole group together to make a large scale mandala. So we found this really great synergy between us, and we're going to do another workshop. The next one will be in Victoria, I think. So stay tuned.
When's that going to be? Is it booked?
It's not booked yet. No, it's just in the planning stages. I'm looking at different venues around. I've been driving around looking at different venues, trying to pick one. But it should happen later in the summer or the fall. But stay tuned at sacredgeometry.academy for more information about the events.
Awesome. Yeah. And, Seattle's not far from you. So hopefully you'll come down and do one of these events here sometime. There's a lot of interested people here. So I'd love to get a crew together to celebrate that with you and participate and learn from you in that way. So please.
Well, I would love to. Yeah, I just can't tell you how transformative that experience in Ireland was for all the participants, and me included. It's an amazing experience. So I want to do more of that.
Yeah, that's a really important thing on this quest. You know, I mean, as we self-initiate into the mysteries, we can feel a bit alienated, or as you mentioned earlier, we kind of have to go through that dark night. It can be rough. You get a little bit different than the rest of the world that you've been used to. But then opening back up to fellowship and other folks who are on similar paths, each our own, but coming together in communities. And we find that these mysteries that come in on our own path, when we do this together in groups, it just, we open that antenna even wider, right? We're tapping in through the entire collective antenna. And it's such a gift to come together in circle. So I love hearing that you're providing that now and bringing these experiences together. And I can't wait to experience one myself.
It'd be great to have you in one of the workshops. It'd be fantastic to see you in person. And there's something ineffable that's conveyed, in person, that it's not the information so much as the experience. And that's what I learned in Ireland. It's really the experience of geometry that transforms you. And it's so much more powerful when you do it in a group of people than if you're just doing it at home by yourself.
Yeah, and that's such an important teaching too. I watched sacred geometry on YouTube and Secrets in Plain Sight and read about it in books for a long time before I actually took a compass into my hand. And that's the next level. Everything changes when you start drawing yourself, right? So people who are practicing in the Arts of the Chart course, I hope you are practicing. I hope you're drawing, right? Less jawing, more drawing. Well, Scott, it's such a treat. I don't like to use this hero word often, but you have been that for me and such an amazing guide on my path into the mysteries. I've said that many times today, and you'll hear that anytime you and I speak, because I just have so much gratitude for the gifts that you've given into the world. You've been such tremendous service to me and so many people, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us here today. Thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really glad to have been inspirational. So I hope to continue that and have some more insights for everybody in the future.
Oh, yeah, and they come out every day. So folks, follow Scott Onstott on Facebook as well. I mean, it's breathtaking, the rate at which these mysteries are being revealed through you. It's like every day, this is a new way to square the circle. This is the relationship between sphere and cube that shows you E and pi and phi. And, it's just like...
Sometimes I have like a quiet period, and then other times it just like every day there's something new. It's just funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if we get to talk again, that would be a wonderful place to go of how do we just open ourselves up to receiving these visions and making ourselves available for this code to create itself through us too. So you've been a great example of that. And I better end now or we'll just talk all day.
All right.
So thanks again, Scott. Folks, check out Q, support Q, and check out Scott's works and these many websites mentioned today. I will link them in the descriptions below. And remember to draw, bring yourself to the Temple of the Sacred Geometry Launchpad. And for Scott Onstott, this is Gemini Brett signing off. We will see you in space.